Oh, it's that thing. It's that. Yeah, that. Right? Yeah. We'll get to that. But have you figured out what it is? Hey, I'm Snood. I'm one of the community managers at Coffee Stain Studios, and I have a couple of things I want to talk about today regarding the creatures in our game. There's also a couple of things I want to tell you about the MAM, but we'll get to that, right? So the next update we're working on is update 6, and the theme for this update focuses on improving the exploration aspect of Satisfactory. A big part of exploring the planet boils down to what the environment looks like, where do you go, what kind of resources can you discover, how much do they weigh? And what kind of creatures do you encounter that brings that environment to life? The creatures you encounter on the planet play a big part in the player experience when exploring, and we felt that the current iteration of creatures and their behavior have had some room for improvement. So for this update, we've kind of rebuilt the AI system from the ground up to better support the direction we want to take them in. So doing this proved to be a much bigger undertaking than we estimated, and we ran into like a whole bunch of roadblocks along the way. We're quite happy with the system itself, but there's still a lot of work when it comes to implementing the AI for creatures, and this can take quite some time before we're fully happy with it. The overhaul of the creature AI isn't necessarily to make the enemies harder, it's more about adding variety to the creature's behavior, and that's the key thing here, right? Variety, because while we won't necessarily add new creatures in this update, we are going to make changes to the existing hostile creatures. Let's talk about some of the creature changes we made and what you can expect to see in this update, essentially. So first of all, the spitters in the game will have a different look. We want the spitters to sort of like fit the biome that they reside in. So we've added 3 new spitter types. We've added desert, tropical, and forest looking types that you run into in different sections of the map. There's also like a small version and a big version of them. In the future, we want these different variations to have their own unique attacks and behavior variations as well. But for now, they'll have the same sort of set of behaviors and just look differently, essentially. Hogs have also gotten some tweaks to their behavior when they're attacking the player, and they also know like telegraph when they're doing like that charge a bit better by doing this like animation wind up before they come crashing in. The hogs will still look pretty much the same for now, but we hope to give the hogs some updated looks in the future as well. And on the topic of like general AI behavior, some of the creatures now have a couple of more behavior states. In addition to the existing behavior states, the creatures will now also do like an investigative state sort of to try and figure out like where their enemy went if they're chasing something. And we've also implemented so that creatures now react to sound as well. So enemies will also investigate if they heard something nearby, which also means that you can now sneak up behind enemies to like sucker punch them or just like sneak by them if you want to take the more passive approach, essentially. Don't expect like any fancy like stealth mechanics here or anything like that. It's not Metal Gear Solid or anything. It's just like an added touch to the existing behavior that we have. So what is that cabbage looking yolk thing that we've been teasing for a long time now? Like, what is it? Is it a new plant? Is it a new creature? Well, it's actually none of those things. It's actually a redesign of the crab hatcher. But it's not just a new look for it though. The crab hatcher still triggers the same way as before. When the player gets close to it, it will spawn a bunch of flying crabs that attack the player. The difference now though is that the crab hatcher will keep spawning the baby crabs until the hatcher has been destroyed. We've also tweaked the flying crabs to only have like 1 HP, so they now go down in like 1 hit. And we also felt like their AI was a little bit too complex actually with the way they like roll around on the ground and stuff like that when you hit them. So we decided to simplify their behavior a lot. So these are some of the changes you can expect for update 6 for creatures for now. It isn't everything we originally planned, so we won't be finished with this part of update 6 when it comes out. In the past, we probably would have waited actually with releasing this update until we're closer to our vision of how we want creatures to be in the game. But as I mentioned at the announcement of update 6, we have to sort of work a bit differently if we're ever to reach 1.0 in a reasonable rate. And we also couldn't release all the other stuff without these new system changes, as they are like like depending on one another. So we'll just have to deal with the fact that we didn't manage to fully finish what we set out to do for creatures in update 6. So in some regards, you know, creatures might not be what we aim for them to be right now. In some aspects of the AI might actually be a bit worse than before, but we are going to keep working on this while the update is out on experimental, which by the way is going to be a bit longer than past experimental periods. So expect like a, you know, couple of update drops when it comes to this sort of thing being improved while the game is on experimental. The plan for creatures in the future is to keep working on variety. We intend to tweak creature health and damage values more depending on where you run into them. And as I mentioned before, another thing we didn't have time to get around to is add more variety to the hogs' looks and like have them spawn in like locations where they thematically fit better. In addition to this, there's also a new creature that we were working on. Ooh, but we need a bit more time before we can actually show that off yet. So yeah, big tease. We also want to strengthen the connection between factory building and exploration with creatures and combat. Part of this is why we've introduced new ammo types, as we want players to have access to more powerful and different tools to overcome exploration challenges as they progress. So that's sort of the rundown of like the creature changes that we have planned for now. Now there's another couple of things I want to talk about in this video. One of which is that there's a couple of new parts coming. The creatures in the game will still drop loot once you've defeated them, and all the creature loot will now have to be grinded down into a new part called alien protein, which, boy howdy, doesn't that just look tasty, huh? This part will replace other alien loot in some research and crafting, such as the inhaler. From alien protein, you'll also be able to create these DNA capsules, which will be used for science, research, and some additional unspecified purposes in the future. Another new part that is related to the new ammo type changes is smokeless powder. This part is an advanced type of black powder and can be produced by combining black powder with heavy oil residue in a refinery. The next big thing I want to talk about is the MAM, and specifically some of the changes we're making to the research tree in the MAM. The Blade Runners will now be unlocked in the Quartz tree instead of Caterium, as we felt that Quartz is somewhat underwhelming and Caterium was sort of stealing all the thunder. We've also moved a few noteworthy alt recipes to be unlocked in the MAM now, which is kind of wild. The polyester fabric recipe is now unlocked in the mycelia research tree because we felt it wasn't really useful enough for players to want to spend like a hard drive for it. And the compacted coal is now unlocked in the sulfur research tree along with the turbo fuel recipe, which is like, what? Where's this change coming from? The main reason these two were moved was to avoid the hard drive grind for experienced players. Generally, these recipes also provide like a nicer power progression, so we felt it made sense to make them more accessible. But let us know in the comments if you feel like we goofed it with this decision, because it is a little bit out of the blue, right? But hopefully our reasoning makes sense for this. Another key change we're making to the MAM is that we're expanding the visibility of MAM research to allow players to see more of the future research options. Currently, the MAM hides a large part of the available research, and so in update 6, we're making it so that the future research options are visible. This change is mostly to increase motivation to interact with the MAM and to allow players to better plan like their progression. A similar change has been made to the Awesome Shop as well, so that some items that have research requirements will now show their prerequisite unlock. Milestones and MAM research that unlock such a prerequisite now clarifies that it does, and any shop unlocks with dependencies to any research chain unlocks are no longer hidden until the prerequisite has been met. Count how many times I said prerequisite. It's such a funny word. It's like losing its meaning now that I've said it so many times. So cool, that's probably gonna be all for today. So remember, we're not quite there yet when it comes to the changes we're making to the creatures in update 6. There's more to come on this front, so hopefully you'll be a bit understanding that this area of the game is still a bit of work in progress once the update drops. Anyways, glad you made it to the end of the video, but all good things have to come to an end. Don't forget to floss before brushing your teeth, and we'll see each other in the next one. Bye-bye. Actually, wait. There's actually one more thing. I forgot. Really important. I just wanted to give you an update on what we're planning to do with overclocking in update 6. A few weeks back, I talked about that we were thinking of changing overclocking to be linear, and that we were planning on trying that out in update 6. Well, change of plans. We're not doing that in update 6. We might still do that later down the line, but we want to spend a bit more time looking into this ourselves and evaluate it before we are to give it a go, sort of. So in update 6, you won't see any changes made to overclocking, but we'll see what we do in the future regarding this. So yeah, just really quickly want to get that out there. So yeah, now you know, and knowing is half the battle. Okay, actually, bye. By the way, update 6 is going to be available on experimental next week on June 14th. Fun fact.